Welcome to Licensing in Games podcast from Leia. Very pleased this week to be joined by Timo Olkkola. Was just saying before we started, I'm an honorary Finn now, and Timo said don't push it. But Timo is the founder, or one of the founders of Flowhaven. So Flowhaven is a licensing software. So really interested to talk to Timo today and get some insights into what's going on in the licensing space more broadly. So thanks for joining us, Timo.
No, thank you. Lovely to be here. Anytime we're talking about games, I've grew up with video games. I learned how to speak English from video games. So there was this actual game by Lucasfilms or Lucas Studios called Knights of Old Republic, and I realized that when you read those sentences, that felt like an alien language to me. I was very young then, and actually the actions made differences, so I could actually learn to kind of what certain words meant, like save a game, quit, and then like longer sentences also when I was, choosing my actions. So yeah, I guess I have to thank Star Wars for learning English.
Awesome. So basically, me as a recent immigrant to Portugal, I need to find some Portuguese video games and just play them all day so I can learn this language.
There you go. But most, like, the same goes for Japanese, that like anime is a fantastic teacher. Same as I was playing Ghost of Tsushima. And you can put Japanese language into it and you learn so much. So maybe there's a way that you can actually just change the dialogue option and audio option to Portuguese.
Maybe. Cool. Well, I guess before we get too far into it, it'd be great to get an overview of what Flowhaven actually is. I gave a very brief introduction in the intro, but yeah, it'd be great to hear from one of the founders. What is Flowhaven?
So Flowhaven is a licensing management software. And traditionally, licensing management softwares have been around 20 years, and I would call Flowhaven the second generation of licensing softwares. And I think we started the company in 2016, and basically what we wanted to do, we wanted to put everything into one system for licensing companies, meaning that you can manage agreements, approvals, and royalties in one system, and the information is seamless between the teams, and also when it's shared to licensing partners and from licensing partners, whether it's related to when we're dealing with the submission. Okay, what is this product that is going out there? What was actually agreed, what can be done, that information flows from the sales to the product team. Also the same, once the royalties come in, the product team knows what products are selling, which are trending in which territories, which categories. And the whole endpoint of all of this is that what we see at Flowhaven is that our customers have more happier licensing partners, because everything is in order. They get answers fast. Also, everybody makes more profit. The licensee makes more profit. They make more sales. Retailers are happy, and same as, of course, brand owners are happy that they're making sales. And the best part, fans are happier because the products that go out on the market are well thought, are based on also an analytical information, not just a gut feeling that, hey, this is something that we should do. So it's kind of becoming we try to make like a licensing from a more kind of analog work to a kind of digital machine in a sense, and trying not to forget the human element and creative element that is always needed there.
Interesting. I think that's a really good overview. Really good way of describing the transition from analog to digital as well. I like that.
Yeah. I have done this few years, and I used to do the pitch like based on features. I'm from Finland, so I'm very functional. I'm looking at more like, hey, this is the feature, this is what it does. But then people start to snore on some of the meetings in Vegas and BLE, so I kind of realized that this is maybe not working out. So.
Cool. I know you guys raised a $16 million Series A 2021, so congrats. But yeah, keen to hear how things are going at Flowhaven. How many in the team now? What type of customers are you working with?
So we're around, I would say, 35 persons right now. We have folks in, US is our main market. We have also big Europe presence in London, in Helsinki, where we started the company. And then we also have presence in Tokyo, Japan, and we work all around the world with customers. I think we had a joke once that I think was in last year's Vegas Expo. We had a kind of marketing had a joke that the only place we don't work is Antarctica. Um, but getting there, maybe penguins will have a licensing program someday. Um, but yeah, and it's mostly brand owners. We do work with agencies, and especially like larger agencies also.
Mhm.
And but mainly the biggest value comes when you have a team that is sitting around the world in different offices. Really, you're managing a big IP portfolio. You need to understand that, hey, what is expected from me today to do in order to support my team, but also to support my licensing partners. Where can I find more licensing partners? Which licensing partners are actually making me the money? All this kind of stuff. So usually, we look at a kind of, three licensing team members and up that start using Flowhaven. The biggest ones we have are running billions of dollars in licensing today.
Okay, cool. What got you into licensing? Uh, it's an interesting space, and I'm sure you didn't grow up, as a young boy in Finland saying, "Mum, I want to be in licensing." So, like, how did you start Flowhaven, and like, why did you want to get into this space?
So I think the typical route, as everybody has, is just I kind of found myself on the industry. So I grew up as a heavy metal singer, and we used to do terrible music, but we used to have like a friends band, and everybody was doing kind of selling merch and stuff. So I was the one kind of handling our merch and try to make sense, like, hey, how do you do this? And kind of learned, that, hey, wow, there's this is actually the way to make money, because nobody wanted to buy the music itself. So I was like, hey, actually, maybe the merch is something that would actually sell, and people love that. It makes people feel like part of community. I realized that it's not enough that you just put a logo there. You have to have either something on the back, like saying like, hey, crew of this band, or something that makes them feel that, hey, I was one of the early adopters. I'm one of the real fans of this band. And that was really interesting to me. And then kind of, growing up, I, of course, then realized that it's massive industry was not just related to music. And me and my co-founder, Kalle, we met in university, and he used to be working with Rovio Entertainment, doing the Angry Birds licensing program and managing kind of that from the operational side. And we started talking, and he had the idea that, hey, why hasn't anybody done this sort of a software that is kind of has the modern appeal, has the modern way of working, that it connects like everything under one ecosystem rather than being in different modules or, in different systems. So that's when we got talking, and yeah, just started doing it, to be honest. And it was crazy. Like, I still remember that I crashed Kalle's couch the first like 6 months of the company, because I didn't even have a place in Helsinki back then. And then we went to first Vegas Expo. I think we had like one customer then. I would knock every door and say like, "Do you want software?" I was like, yeah, guidebook. Do not do it like this. But yeah, you gotta hustle, I guess. So yeah, we definitely did that.
Well, it's so if you want to start a company in licensing or software related to licensing, it seems as though musician is like a fairly common starting point, because Ratchet was also a musician, and like the way he started Leia was licensing one of his band's songs into a video game, and realizing like it was all through fax and
Yeah.
like on paper contracts and that type of thing. I mean, Ratchet was also working at a tech company, so it wasn't like the full time thing. But musician licensing startup seems to be a career path.
Yeah, and it is, that's definitely one path. I think one of the common things I see is licensing is one of the lovely industries where legal, creative, and commercial business comes together, and that's something I've never met before. And that was the most kind of eye opening for me. Is that why I fell in love with this? Is that I love elements of all of those, but I don't want to be tied into one of these things. Like, I love creative world. but at the same time, I want creative things to make a real impact on the world. I want them to also have a commercial impact. At the same time, I also understand that we have to have common rules on how we do things. So legal is really important that we have everybody respects their own space in a sense, and gives a safe place for everybody to, do things together, knowing that, hey, we have rules that we can trust. And that was something that I have never seen before. I still remember my first one of my first expos was E3, and I went to to pitch a large video game company and their executive. Very nice, was very understanding. Terrible pitch from our side, like terrible, and uh, but very kind. They said like, hey, guys, you're a little early for us. Really interesting what you're doing, but you should go talk to these and these guys. And I was like, but those are your competitors. Why would you name them? And they're like, well, in a sense, they're not actually our competitors because they're after, different type of consumer, kind of a different age, different persona. And that was really interesting for me that actually people are working together in this industry, not just seeing each other as opponents, but actually like that it's more like licensing industry, trying to make a kind of push for everybody. And I love that. That's something I love about this industry.
Yeah, I think you're the first creative I've ever spoken to who also likes contracts. So
Oh yeah,
interesting.
I really love, but in order to be in a license software space, I think you have to love contracts. But yeah, it is it's something that is like, like even when COVID started, like how much discussion was between like force majeure clause and all that, and that's very interesting discussions, and thankfully we're in a better place right now with the world and with the situation. But those are always interesting, that what are the common rules that we agree to, and do they make sense?
Yeah, it's an affliction. It's an affliction. So this is the first time we've had another licensing software provider on the podcast. So, given that you're living in this space every day, I'm curious to see or hear, sorry, what are some of the biggest trends that you're seeing from licensors generally at the moment?
Well, I think there's a couple. I think the one big one is everybody's talking about is digitalization itself. That's like a huge, has been going on for many years now, and it's often misused word and has become very boring also, overused word. But what I mean with that is that I think since many of the consumers and their time, or fans use their time, is digital in digital spaces, is that has changed how brands have to be aware of their consumers' behaviors. If brands have to realize that, hey, it's not just enough that we're in physical retail, we have to be also looking at how do we get to e-commerce, plus also how do we get to to these ecosystems that are IoTs, or we talk about even like, for myself, like I'm playing video games, I can go to a store, buy my game from there on my device, and it's very simple for me. And if a brand is not there, they're missing out revenue, they're missing out awareness, they're missing out new fans. And that's one big part of having those relationships, having that network, having that part of your licensing strategy. The other piece I would say is then through that has been that also the kind of main one revenue stream doesn't work anymore. So if you're trying to do one thing only as a brand owner, it will only carry you so far, meaning that you really have to look at honestly, what are our revenue streams, and even inside licensing, how are we at the same time, of course, awareness is a key thing, being certain to brand values, that's really important, of course, but at the same time you have to think of the end result, that how profitable is this licensing business, are we bringing the monies in, and also are we doing the right things, meaning that is profit actually meeting the quality. So even if we would be making money, it shouldn't be short term, it should be always long-term partnership, long-term great products, innovation that brings it. And that's really challenging. I think those two elements have brought a really challenging combination where you have to move really fast, but necessarily you are not used to being fast, and also it creates a vulnerability to your brand, because when you move fast, you got to be really careful to do it the right way, otherwise you may take missteps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, how much do you think that games and interactive are a part of that kind of like digitalization? Is that the biggest, you know, is that one of the biggest topics that you hear being discussed amongst licensors? And do you feel as though it's like everyone wants to be in that space now, but they just don't really know how to do it? Or
Yeah, I think like, yeah, everybody wants to be there. I think they don't necessarily say that, but I think everybody sees value of the space of video games, of that, and I think one of the biggest values of video games is the immersiveness. Like, even if I play a video game, I get lost into that world for hundreds of hours, sometimes, unfortunately, sometimes thousands of hours. But yeah, my family isn't happy sometimes, but it is very different if you compare it to a movie. For example, movie is 2 hours. That limits a lot what you can tell, how much commitment you can create. That's one of the reasons why anime has been, I think, in a huge movement of anime and huge growth of anime, has been that they've been able to build those 500 episodes, 400 episodes, and that gives you a lot of room to create a fantastic story based on those mangas. And I think video game is very similar, that there's so much room to do things, and to do that immersiveness.
yeah, and like, do you see what are some of the opportunities that you see in that space for licensors? And are there any opportunities in that space that you think are being kind of undercapitalized or not capitalized on well by licensors?
Yeah, I think, well, it always comes back to the licensing strategy, licensing program strategy. What are you after? What is the end goal of a licensing program? Is it to create awareness, find a um, you know new fans, that new fan base that you're trying to attract, kind of expands the current fans, or find new categories that you can maybe create more revenue. That's really important first to understand. I think then it's just a question of how you want to do it. It is challenging when you start to think that, do you want to go after mobile games, kind of more casual, even hyper casual games that are sometimes you know might not be for some gamers, but at the same time, for most of the gamers, daily gamers, that's a huge thing. They love those games, they want to play those games. Um, and that's a big component. The one component is also the that it's a big, if you do a video game, like an actual kind of a AAA rated video game, like, it is very time consuming. It takes a long strategic movement. So it's very hard if you have a fast moving licensing program to do that, because it's very hard to predict where you'll be in 3 to 5 years. So I think for evergreen brands, like, standard video games are fantastic. Then looking at kind of more character properties that are more kind of kids entertainment, they're like a shorter games are a good thing to do. I think some of the brands are doing a fantastic job on that front, where necessarily you're not creating a game that lasts 200 hours. You're creating a game that lasts 20 hours or 10 hours, but it's real entertainment for the parent and for the kid. So it's like a mutual common time. The one element that I see mostly talked about right now, I think, has been, especially last year, was the kind of gambling side of things. So loot boxes, skin purchases, all this kind of stuff. And that for many brands is kind of a, I would say, gray area right now to how to handle that. At the same time, they want to be true to their brand values, but they want to be involved in these universes that has been created. But it's very challenging because these games, their whole revenue model is based on these, that, hey, they're free to play, but then for those fans that want to get more out of it, they purchase things. So fine line in those, but everything comes back to, like, how is your life processing. I hope to see kind of more open discussion, as we are here, about this, that, hey, what are the best practices that other brands have done, so that the fans in the end could get the best games. There's a huge risk for video game entertainment that if people are too afraid to make any games or take that big investment, that can also really hurt the industry. So anyway, brands and video game companies can come together openly and say like, hey, what has worked, what has not worked, and look at that, and then kind of find best ways to work together. That's really important.
Yeah, when you said the biggest topic over the last year, I thought you were actually going to say metaverse, Web3, which is also another thing that I think licensors don't really know how to approach.
I don't think anybody knows how to approach those. That's the challenge.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of tied into this concept of risk, right, for licensors and the unknown. Do you hear anything around loot boxes or how games are monetizing, or around these kind of more risky topics? What is like concerning for licensors when it comes to games and the interactive space, and like what are they saying about those things?
Well, it's the longevity of those spaces. It's like it's the same as my personal investment. What I always do, I think like, okay, 10% of my stuff, my own personal savings, I can put to a little bit more riskier investments, but like rest I keep in kind of a more safer place. And I think that's a very valid logic to do in licensing space, to think about like that. You're not exactly sure are some of these companies, some of these innovations going to be there, going to be the big trend centers they said that they will be in the next 5 years. So it's kind of good to have a little bit riding there, but not too much, and definitely not in a way that would hurt your brand long-term wise. At the same time, then, what I think why I put still 10% to that personal investment is that those can yield fantastic results. Like that's the biggest thing that everybody is looking right now, is that even if you make a one successful video game licensing program or extend your IP there, that can be the most successful licensing product you have. And it is not only that you are creating that one video game licensing, you're extending the whole brand into a new universe. In a sense, your fans live in that universe, then you can just keep extending that, and not just with sequels of the game, but also DLCs, characters, more story, season pass. There's so many things you can do, and create content around that, and then tie that into also physical products. And that's something that is like a massive opportunity. And I think the like Web3 and metaverse are then a totally different topic, because that's again still really like on a place where nobody knows how that's going to end up. I was talking Web3 in Silk, sustainability and licensing, last autumn. I said honestly that, to be honest, nobody knows where this is going, probably in the world. At least I don't, what I've like understood and being involved. It's somebody has an idea here, somebody has an idea somewhere else. But in some format, Web3 is going to happen. There were many companies that laughed at internet, laughed at like social media, so kind of Web1, Web2 developments. And now, like, yeah, I guess some of the persons who invested into that growth are getting the last laugh. But yeah, just got to be really careful when playing around with your brand values and your IP there, because losing the trust of fans, that really hurts. And yeah, in those cases, if I always tell brands, if they ask me like how should we go about it, I was like, ask your fans, go to your fans, like go to the most committed fans. Do not come to me, do not come to anybody else to ask. Like your fans know kind of what they want, and if your fan base is you notice that they have a request, that they are actually spending their time online, they're spending their time in video games, like you should be there, because you're doing also not a service to your fans by not being there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. And as brands, licensors are moving more towards digital spaces, games, interactive, What are you seeing there in terms of share of licensing revenue, like from your customer base? Are you seeing that increase? Like, any idea of what percentage that represents of total licensing revenue now?
Well, like it's very hard to say because every licensor has a very differently uh, created licensing program. If you look at corporate brands versus character entertainment brands, then you look at just like purely video game brands that started from the video games. Again, very different structure, very hard to put those into line. You just have to break them down basically by category of the kind of where the brand started from. Um, but I would say overall, the suck like the everybody has like more and more is being tried on this space 100%. And I think the biggest change I've seen is how close the movie like TVs have gone to video games. Video game companies are doing, extending their own IPs to, TV and movies, but at the same time, brands are definitely extending their stuff to video games. And that's a really powerful combination because you already have a proven track record of having that, the people wanna, get deeper into this world, but they also, they really want to get more out of it. So that's a great way. Video games are a really great way to achieve that if you're like a movie and TV brand. But overall, there has been also some cases that, we unfortunately I've heard a few cases where, we worked on a video game and it just didn't work out. Like it just wasn't there. And I think one of those things is that it's just got to be well thought plan of who you're going to do it. Is there, it's coming out in 3 to 5 years or whenever, depending on what type of game you do. So you got to understand that is our brand going to still be the same? Are we expecting that our brand is going to evolve into something else? Also knowing that some of the characters will be locked on, how they look like. Because, if you have a video game coming out years to come, you can't really drastically change your characters overnight. You got to be really careful when doing that. So that poses challenges. But if you have a well thought licensing program where you know that one piece of it will be video game licensing, and you can time that with your partner, and they have a realistic expectations or proven track record as a production company, I think like that should be a vital part of the licensing program.
Yeah, and entertainment, like you said, it makes a ton of sense, right? Where the worlds of like film and TV and games, it's all entertainment, right? It's all merging. But like outside of film and TV, you mentioned corporate brands, consumer brands, these brands that are, typically more, merchandising, right? Like
Yeah.
you're creating coffee cups and lunch boxes and whatever. Are you seeing more of them enter the space of games for the first time? And
yes, and it is one of the things I love is that it is not really like a traditional way we see game, like or how I see personally. I can't speak for anybody else, but how I see games, as kind of a purely entertainment. But suddenly you might have a loyalty program that is actually gamified app that starts to bring you more into actual like a game inside an app, and you might be a loyalty user of a retailer where you go to shop and then you get branded a little game with that corporate brand inside it, since you'd be buying their products. I was like, this is amazing. And then you can unlock like coupons, discount coupons to buy the actual product. I'm like, this is amazing stuff. So stuff like that can be very powerful, reaching the consumer in a way that's very surprising. Like the corporate brands are one of the brands, especially during these tough economic times, that have the most potential really, because their consumers will be there. These are often like daily used or, normally used products, and it's a very strong fan base. So any way you can kind of bridge that gap and also, find them in the digital space, I think there's a massive potential there for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but traditional like making, like sometimes you see like simulator games or driving games and stuff like that. Those are definitely like great possibility sports games, but on top of that, I think there's a lot of kind of things that are not get used that could be, extended into, like mentioning those apps, and kind of how you can also reach those kind of casual daily gamers.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see some of the like, um, things that I would have never considered to like. I would have never thought about going into a game before I started working in gaming. To see like confectionery brands or like corporate brands kind of be integrated into an existing game, and just it kind of intuitively makes sense when you see it. So I think like that's happening more and more, and those collaborations, they're just like the ones that work are the ones where you just like, that's a good fit. I can see why someone on that licensing team wanted to do that. So yeah, it's really interesting to see that start to happen. What about Flowhaven specifically? What are you guys doing on to cater for more of licensing in games? Is there anything that you're building specifically for that kind of use case?
So I wouldn't say specifically build. So it's definitely like how we always see supporting our customers and their licensing programs is that we want to be supporting them wherever they're kind of taking it to, and we want to support different type of licensing, and kind of have we love those programs that have kind of different agreements in very different type of uh, you know, where there's not just hard lines, soft lines only, but kind of extending into multiple different areas, like digital space. So yeah, those are like why we kind of built the whole Flowhaven software for the kind of games licensing. I think the biggest part where we've been helping is just making sure that whenever those approvals hitting, they are manageable. Those like big projects, they're big projects. So we have a that you can kind of have a related submissions. You can link different submissions together, make it like a project management tool in a sense that you understand that what are we doing right now, kind of how far are we with this process of getting our brand out there into a game and all this kind of stuff. That just makes it the actual brand work and brand collaboration just so much easier, because especially on a big project like that, if you're using emails and Excels, or you're using a system that necessarily isn't capable of handling um, these complex workflows, uh, that just becomes a lot of work, and you might find yourself not actually reaching the deadline, but going far over it and going far over the budget also, and then that unfortunately hurts a lot both sides. So the actual licensee and the licensor. So nobody wishes that. So just from the effectiveness side, we've been helping there. And one big part we're doing, we just released analytics for licensing. So what that gives is basically very dynamic way of seeing like how much is this product selling? Are we going to reach the are the products going to be in time for the market for release? Because you're not going to release only the video game. You have a big program around that of, releasing merch, releasing any type of events that you might have or sponsorships that might happen. So there's tons of things happening. So you want to make sure that it's like a well-oiled machine. When the product hits the digital store, everything is ready, and fans can, use their money to support you.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Like the analytics is, as we see the space evolve, really important, because if you're a brand who's like dipping their toe in the gaming space for the first time, or if you're a well-established brand in games and interactive and you're just trying something new, like how do you validate that that's working? And I think when we speak to gaming studios, they have like really clear ways of quantifying that, like we saw this much lift in user acquisition or retention or whatever. On the brand side, it sometimes feels as though it's like it's harder to measure that. So I think that's really important, right?
Yeah, 100%. The good thing is that like in licensing space, like everybody on the executive level, especially and the manager level, and who's been working a few years on the industry, are very good at what they do,
Mhm.
and know this space really well. So they know kind of what are we actually expecting our brand what is our brand value basically, what are we expecting to forecast from these type of deals. So that's real value. I think one of the things is also that one thing to benchmark if you're new to this space is look at the other successes, talk to the industry people, what have they seen, what are the common mistakes that they've done, kind of good learning points. There are a lot of great mobile game companies that have tried their own licensing program. Okay, like why did that work? Why did that not maybe work? All these kind of questions. So I would just say have an open dialogue with companies that have done that before. Also, the production companies, video game companies, they're really good at what they do. Like it is one of the most challenging industries in the world to be that creative and create that kind of whole universe out of nothing, basically, just from code. And they are very usually well-oiled machine on when it comes to their business models. So I would say also, talk with them, have a really good dialogue before taking the deep dive into the like what are you actually planning to do, because sometimes I hear that some companies are like, hey, we're going to do this like awesome game, open world, it's going to have everything, and then you go like, yeah, but that's a big investment to do, and if you're trying to go like RPG style, so why don't we take a step back and let's try the market with a smaller, for example, a mobile game that's more like casual, has kind of basically simple logistics, and if the universe is liked, let's jump then to a bigger one, let's start building that towards that kind of a massive game experience.
Yeah, and I think like walk before you run, right? I don't even think you need to create an entirely new game first. You could just
Yep.
let's see if we can just drop our brand into an existing game as like an object that people can buy, or
Yes.
let's see, is that the right audience for us, and then maybe we could do something more with that game, and iterating and testing it. It's I think is a good approach as well.
Yeah, and one of the good things there is that if you're afraid that you don't want to do that with your main IP, or with to risk, especially on those test kind of scenarios, one way to do is use a little bit lesser known IP from your portfolio. That's something I see a lot. And everybody sees a lot, of course. If you're looking, especially battle royale games, you see suddenly a character you didn't even realize that, okay, this is not that well known, but at the same time, wow, it's like yielding great results, and suddenly, if that's a win, suddenly that also character, people and fans want to get more, so suddenly it goes into publishing deals, maybe you get them into merge deals, it suddenly has its own pull. So there can be real win-win situation in those kind of things. But again, like, really love to see more and more collaboration on video games, that brands put their you know uh, put themselves into video games, but also that video game companies start using their own brands for licensing more. Um, but at the same time, again, reminding that always linking that back to your brand licensing strategy, like that it's never short term gains will never win those long term gains when it comes to like your brand value.
Yeah, and I think this topic ties into the next question I want to ask, which is there's more complexity and inherently more risk when it comes to games versus traditional hardlines, and these types of licensing that have been around for a long time and are kind of well understood now, or traditional consumer products. Where do you think things get stuck the most when it comes to games? Is it, licensors understanding the space and each proposal, or like the design approvals? And do you have any recommendations for, what works best in this space versus consumer products, and what you see the best brands and licensors doing?
That's a long question. Let's start somewhere.
Have to like really load it up,
Yeah. So I would say that the one thing, like, definitely there's like some, um, licensing experts always have like their kind of areas that they know the best. It really depends on individuals, like what are their kind of what is their experience with certain brands. But that's definitely not stopping everything. I think there's the one thing that has been a common worry is that many people have seen that there's been failed projects, and sometimes maybe that information really isn't carried over to why that project failed, and also that it's good to remember that the video game companies also learn from those failed. For many companies, first time they're working with a big brand, they have never didn't even know that, wow, there's a lot of control this brand owner takes over their brand. We didn't even realize how important this brand is to them, and that sometimes can be a surprise for when you start to partnership for a video game company. And and but I think the one thing is just finding, I call that like finding two champions, meaning like one from each side that have a great dialogue, understand each other, understand that we are building a creative product together, but it needs to be within our brand values, within our what our fans expect. But we also understand that some things are not possible to do, or are possible to do from a creating a video game standpoint. So I would say it's more like architect designing a building and then somebody actually building it, and they're them meeting each other. That like what is actually possible. Architect might design the most beautiful building ever, then the actual builder comes to say like, yeah, this is nobody can build this. There doesn't even exist this kind of a material to build this. And then you start to work together. Okay, but how can we get as close as possible? So that's one big piece, having those both sides open dialogue. I think then the other front is that few times I've heard is that I'm waiting for a good time. So right now it's not the time. We're looking at how the space evolves. And in my opinion, that's a little bit of a mistake, because that digital space is one of those spaces that especially young kids and generations are growing up, and if you're not there, you're missing out. And you might be saying that's fine, like we're still in other places, and necessarily it's fine if we're not in digital. And I think that's not the way. You should have a massive awareness, you should be trendy, and make sure that you are reachable for your audiences. And that's something that I hear a lot, that sometimes you don't want to make a risk, but yeah, big risks have big opportunities. I would say maybe that's the best way to put it. I don't know. That was a long question, so did that much answer at all?
Probably asked it really poorly, so I'll no, that I think that was a good answer. But I mean, specifically around like creating a game, what do you see as like some of the biggest complexities involved in that compared to creating merchandise, for example? Like where do you think it falls down the most?
Yeah, so okay, two things. So one is that it's like, especially for doing a game itself, just very complex workflow, very big project. Managing that project from the approval side, that's a very challenging task. It's the same that goes for theme parks. If you're building a theme park, it's a big project to get it done, and get it done correctly. And then the second piece is definitely that. How do you tie into the brand itself and what the kind of licensed products look like and the game itself? So this is really sometimes restricting for the video game company or the production company, when they have to follow exactly what the brand is and they can't change that. And it might be for a creative person, they look at the character and go, I actually think that this character would be much better, the story would be much better if they do this. But suddenly, the merge product that has been planned on the side, that the actual creative person from the video game company didn't even realize, that actually has something relevant to that. And let's say they change a hat, or they change a face or a costume of that character, and suddenly the merge is something that was with the old costume, it fails. So that's why it's really, you got to be really careful when working on those collaborations, and it is restrictive for a production company, but at the same time, you get to do something with a really cool brand that has an already existing audience, and that's a big value.
Yeah, I think you answered it before as well, with like the relationship is really important to counteract that, because it's a creative process. You're creating something different. It's not like a production line where you're creating, mugs or hats or merch or whatever, right? It's, there are, boundaries that can be pushed. And I think, like you said, if you've got two parties who are communicating about that and having that open dialogue, then, it can make the process a lot easier. Cool. I answered my own question.
That was a really good answer, though.
Really long question, I will admit. Cool. So I know we're kind of coming up to time, but before we wrap up, I just wanted to talk about what's next for you and the Flowhaven team. What's coming up this year? What are you doing?
Wow, we continue as we've been, doing. So for us, like the whole idea that is bringing those brand owners together. We create agents bringing closer to licensees, as same as brand owners close to licensees. That's our full focus. Anywhere we can do to support the industry, to make the kind of operationalizing management easier. The one challenging thing, not just in video games, but all kind of licensing, is that it is very heavy when it comes to tasks, meaning that like for one person, it's a small team managing hundreds of partners globally. And you have to keep everything, on track. You have to make sure that everything works and, that nothing kind of falls or goes wrong. And I would call it like trying to control a falling snowball that is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So you really want to make control. And that's something that we see that we try to help our customers as much to control. And it's going to be even more challenging now with, of course, with digital space, ESG, all this kind of stuff. But in the end, it's all like, if we take a step back and realize why we're doing this, why the whole licensing industry exists, is that there are fans who want this. We're in a verge of something really cool happening. That is that, these fans, we have first time ever, we have a massive opportunity to reach these fans in multiple platforms, in multiple places, and getting closer to them. And that's a real opportunity, real value that can bring a lot of joy to people around the world. Also create, make more money from everybody in the supply chain of those products. So I'm very hopeful when it comes to licensing. And if you look at the statistics just from a licensing industry growth, it is just staggering. Like how it grew up from 70s to 2000, then 2010 you start to see this like massive ramp from 180 billion to where it stands right now. And it is just massive growth that has happened in the last kind of 10 years. And I don't expect that to change. I actually expect that to be even faster.
Yeah, it's a good space to be. Good space to be in. Well, I appreciate the chat today. It was really interesting to get your perspective on the industry and then more specifically games. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Great to be here.
Thanks for watching the Licensing and Games video series. For more content like this, subscribe to our channel or check us out at layerlicensing.com.